Okay, now that we can hopefully all understand each other, let me welcome you again. Thank you very much for joining us today as we continue on the road down to COP30. We're just a few short months away from the annual UN Climate Conference in Brazil. And at this point, and to this audience, I hardly need to make the case that we are at a critical moment for our planet and that strong action is urgently needed. Sadly, the reality is different. And that's why the Franciscans are planning to send a large delegation to Belém. Last time, we talked about the history of climate action at the United Nations and how Franciscans were involved from the very start. Today, we'll look ahead and discuss what we'll be doing at the upcoming COP in Brazil. Today, we'll dive into why Franciscans can be at the UN in the first place, how we work there, and what our priorities will be during the climate conference. We'll also go over some of the events that will be happening in Brazil and explain how you can join even if you're not there with us. While we do all of this, we'd love to hear from you as well. So if you have any questions for us or any comments, you can send them through the Q&A, which you'll also find at the bottom of the screen. And we'll do our best to answer your questions throughout the webinar. So in order to do all this, I'm joined by a great panel today. We have Panuka Pulantiran, our Africa Program Current Coordinator, who regularly accompanies Franciscan brothers and sisters at the United Nations. I'm also joined by Puri Chayono, FI's International Advocacy Director, and he's our in-house expert on all matters related to climate and the environment. We also have Brother Rodrigo Perret, an OFM Franciscan from Brazil. He's a member of the Inter-Franciscan Service for Justice, Peace and Ecology, and he works closely with communities affected by extractive industries. He's also a member of the political committee of the People Summit that will take place alongside COP30 in Belém, and we'll tell you more about that later in the webinar. And finally, we have Moema Miranda, a secular Franciscan from Brazil. She's an anthropologist and a member of the Churches and Mining Network there. And of course, my name is Thomas. I'm the communications officer for Franciscans International. So to dive straight in, I'll start with Panuka. When we talk about the UN, we talk about the United Nations. But clearly, Franciscans International is not a nation. So my question is, why is it that we can be a voice at the UN? And simply put, why do they let us into the building?
That's a great question. Thanks so much, Thomas, for this introductory question. So the idea was to discuss a bit about what the ECOSOC status is, and for an NGO to effectively participate in UN meetings and access premises, each organization needs a general consultative status, which is granted by the UN Economic and Social Council, or what we call ECOSOC. And the status is granted to organizations that represent large segments of society on a wide range of issues. And the consultative status is granted by ECOSOC upon recommendation of the Committee on NGOs, which is composed of 19 member states. So this is also up to the discretion of states composing the Committee of NGOs to grant the status or not. And to completely speaking, an NGO needs to meet some criteria to be granted a general consultative status with ECOSOC. And the NGO must have existed for at least 2 years, having established headquarters, a representative structure with authorities to speak for its members, transparent decision-making, and accountability processes. And even though some organizations meet all the criteria, some states can deliberately block organizations from obtaining ECOSOC status because it would give visibility to some issues that states do not want to be addressed at the international stage. This was, for instance, the case of an NGO called International Dalit Solidarity Network, which only obtained the ECOSOC status last year.
Okay, so the ECOSOC system is a way of essentially bringing in other voices into the UN. How did this happen for Franciscans International?
So this is very much linked to FI's history and why in the first place FI was established. And so FI as an organization was established in 1989 to amplify the voices of the Franciscans at the UN. This was done under the impulsion of Sister Elizabeth and Brother Dionysius. And the idea was to promote Franciscans' participation in the UN because of the observation that Franciscans' work with the most vulnerable and marginalized could be highlighted. And they can bring a unique perspective on underreported or overlooked human rights situations. And Sister Elizabeth and Brother Dionysius, who worked closely with migrants and believed that this situation deserved to be known internationally, reached out to the UN. So after opening an office in New York in 1990, all the conditions were met for an ECOSOC status request. And so FI was granted general consultative status in 1994 because we have our large constituencies through Franciscan congregations around the world, and we cover a broad range of thematics, which also corresponds to the UN agenda. And the status is not just the key to enter the UN, but to also participate in UN proceedings. And it's also a recognition of FI's worldwide presence of Franciscans who cover a broad range of issues and human rights issues.
Okay, so concretely speaking, as an advocate, what allows this status to do you from day to day?
So it allows two main things. So first is to access the building, so access the UN as such, by providing UN passes for us, but also the representatives, so the Franciscans themselves. And so the ability to enter meetings, conference rooms, and interact with diplomats and UN staff. So for instance, we can invite Franciscans for a designated Human Rights Council session here in Geneva, where they can meet diplomats, like-minded human rights NGOs, but also deliver an oral statement or participate at a side event as a panelist. And it is also an opportunity for us and for the Franciscans to be exposed to international decision-making on human rights and reflect on how it can support Franciscans at the local level. The second thing is that the status allows is to participate in UN meetings themselves. So be it in Geneva or be it in New York. It doesn't always imply that FI has a negotiating role as such, but we have the opportunity to influence processes by identifying identifying and meeting key stakeholders, which will be the case at COP30. So we can participate both in person, but also through sending written statements or written reports. So when it comes to written reports, we can submit reports to human rights mechanisms, such as treaty bodies, or the Universal Periodic Review. So these are two specific human rights mechanisms. I'm happy to dive in a bit deeper into that if you want more details as well. So for both these mechanisms, we can contribute to these processes by submitting information in a report, but also when there is an urgent situation that comes to the attention of the Franciscans and require immediate action of the human rights system, we can submit urgent appeals if we have enough information on them. And we can also raise urgent situation at the Human Rights Council, for instance, through an oral statement, which we recently did with on the deadly crackdown on protests in Indonesia and the impact of US migration policy and the surge of insurgent attacks in Mozambique in the province of Cabo Delgado. And so even though we act on urgent situation, we hope to also get involved more in longer term policy making at the international level, which we have been doing, for instance, the recognition on the right to a healthy environment in 2021. So FI has been involved on this process for a long time as well and pushed for the recognition of that right. And we also take part in negotiations such as on the legally binding instruments on transnational cooperation. So it's big name to highlight a process that is trying to put regulation on companies, on business and corporations. And this process has been ongoing for 10 years due to the resistance of many states, and I can let you guess which ones are pushing back against this treaty, and also the growing presence of businesses in this space that are also hoping to stall the negotiations. And so in October, we'll be entering the 11th year of the negotiations, and I'm hoping that it will advance in a good direction as well.
Okay, thank you. As luck would have it, we actually have two Franciscans with us who have been at the UN. Moema, you're one of them. You've been in spaces like the COP, and I would like to ask you, what is it like to be there, and how do you approach taking the cases that you see at the grassroots, like the everyday struggles of people, and translate that to this UN space, and while you engage with the international community?
Thank you very much. It's a big pleasure to be together here and to listen to what we are doing together in this level. From our side, as civil society and as Franciscan secular, we always act, as we say, inside and outside. So the organization of the people, of the grassroots communities, of the faith-based communities is quite important outside the building, so that the ones that are acting inside the building can have more strong voice to talk and to be present. I think that it has been an important strategy from the Catholic Church as a whole, since Paris, for example, when Pope Francis was very much concerned on how to impact on the negotiations. He had allowed that to see presented, but we, from Franciscans and from many other faith-based organizations, we were outside the building, organizing, taking part, mobilizing, and raising consciousness of what was going on these negotiations. As you know, and as we already heard in this conversation, many times for the people that are in their daily lives, all this that has to do with climate is so far away, seems to be so distant of what is happening in my neighborhood, with my job, or with my necessities of health, or of food, or of all the daily necessities. And we know that these are things that are deeply connected, no? Because many of the decisions, or as you said before, the decisions that were not taken, they will affect the lives, and primarily the lives of grassroots people. So we as Franciscans, we have a very important and committed process of working from our countries, in our grassroots areas, in our fraternities, in our churches, in our parishes, to raise the consciousness and to help to make those links so that people can understand better the importance of being there. Then some of us will be there as representatives, let's say, as being sent to, but it's quite important that we do not lose the connection with what is going on in our grassroots level. So I think one of the most important parts of the work that we have been doing since COP, and even before in the People's Summit here in Rio, in Rio Plus 20, was that I would say that commitment and that exercise of a long preparatory process that connect people from different countries with different realities, but with the same perspective, so that our presence as Franciscans can really be representative and bring back all that we have been doing together on these different possibilities of participation in the COP level.
Okay, thank you so much. If I hear you right, it's a lot about connections and a commitment to relay that, what you learn from those connections. And that actually brings me to Budi. Budi, as we're preparing for COP30 in November, what have these connections taught us, and what are the issues that we'll be raising there as Franciscans?
Thank you very much, Thomas, for the questions, and thank you very much to you all for attending this webinar. And indeed, as what Panuka has explained, that we have the privilege to be part of these global discussions on climate change, and Moima just rightly said on the importance of us in bringing the concerns of our Franciscan network and the people we accompanied to be part of the discussions, but also to be part of influencing the decision maker. So for the COP that we are going to attend in Belen in November, there are several issues that we would like to also bring, but I would like to highlight two key issues in which we have been working together. The first issue is on the issue of non-economic loss and damage. Non-economic loss and damage is within the discussions under the subject loss and damage in the climate negotiations. So loss and damage refers to the adverse impact of climate change that go beyond what can be prevented through mitigations or adapted through resilience efforts. So it is about the irreversible harm caused by the climate change, both economic and non-economic, that mostly the vulnerable country that contribute less to climate change but suffer the most. So loss means irreparable harm, such as loss of life, loss of biodiversity, cultural heritage, or even territory. The damage means reparable harm, like the destruction of infrastructure or the impact on the agricultural productivity. So for us, it is important to also underline the aspect of non-economic loss and damage that refers to the intangible impact of climate change on those aspects that cannot be measured economically. So it's not only about economic, but go beyond the economic values. This will include on the issue of the personal loss, cultural loss, ecological loss, biodiversity loss, and those things might not be able to be valued in the monetary, but they are very important indeed. So last year we did a research on that issue, and we spoke with several experts, but also the negotiators, in which we will try to continue again in this COP30. So the second issue that we would like also to raise is on the issue of just transitions. This is very debatable terminology. So Rodrigo will be able to also explain it later on that. But just transitions within the current UN climate negotiation refers to the fact that there is a need to the shift toward low carbon economies, which are more environmentally sustainable, while ensuring that vulnerable communities are not left behind in the process. However, there are still questions regarding whose just transitions, because just transitions that has been discussed now is considered much more from the perspective of the North that are trying to use the same system, but trying to do the transitions from the energy that is not considered green into green energy. However, in these so-called just transitions, there are some forced sacrifices, in which often the just energy transition needs critical minerals that can be found in the indigenous territories and often are extracted without the consent of the indigenous people. And normally there's no consultations or discussions with them either. And finally, the just transitions into green energy benefits much more people in the developed countries rather than people at the local. So often when we talk about just transition, it's a discourse that can also be considered as a forced solutions, because it's not really addressing the core problem, which is the system that we have now, into something that is much more sustainable, into something that is more an alternative to the system that we have now. So we are doing a little bit of research now, and we will try to see on what kind of understanding among us, among the faith-based communities, on the discourse of just transition that is now being promoted at the COP30 in Berlin. So I can stop there, Thomas.
Yeah, because this might be a good point to also think about that at the UN we approach these issues through a lens of human rights, and oftentimes through quite a technical lens. At the same time, we're also approaching these issues as Franciscans. So, Rodrigo, I wanted to ask you if you hear these concepts of just transition, of non-economic loss and damage, why do they resonate with you as a Franciscan brother?
I think we need to consider, I'm taking from what's been said by Moema and then by Moody, and even the role of Franciscans International. There are many, we can start making connections. These days, we've been studying the report that will be presented tomorrow. Is the Secretary General report. It's an analytic report with recommendations on just transitions. And what we see in this, it's he highlights what's very important and talk and dialogue directly with the territories when he talks about the human rights, you know, and how it requires a more transforming energy work and governance systems in democratic and participatory ways. But I would make a reflection of the damages and losses in one perspective. They are real. I think faith-based communities, when they start to talk not only about the economically measured losses and damages, but also about the material losses. We're talking about a lot of important things. You just imagine in terms of ancestrality of the people that are on move, and they need to leave the lands, you know. But those funds are important, yes. Just like the finance, the climate finance is important in itself, but it doesn't tackle the main issue. It is what is generating, because it's just like, okay, there is a problem, and then we're going to have economical resources for reparation. And part of this economic resources for reparation is also for adaptation, and also to finance technology transfer. So it means the solutions are coming from the same system and from the same groups when we see in terms of corporations. So I think here, and we are writing a statement that may be reading tomorrow or the after tomorrow together with the brothers and sisters from the Lutheran World Federation. And from our perspective, how we related all these issues that are coming from the climate crisis that we live in with our faith perspective. I think for us, specifically as Franciscans, of course, St. Francis in the Cantor of Creatures, he teaches us to praise God through brother sun, sisters, sister moon, brother wind, sister, and then the spiritual vision. This spiritual vision, of course, we all know it's not poetry alone. It's a prophetic call to, to lie in harmony with creation and recognizing every creature as sacred, never as disposable. And this is one lack in the document and the report of the Secretary General. When he talks about human rights, when he talks about so many needs that and any crisis that we're passing through, but nature is avoided as in its intrinsic value. Another part of our attention now, especially for COP30, we need to take looking to in terms of the so-called just transitions, and because of just transitions, there are a lot of impacts that are happening, and that's why those funds, we need to look to the church position also. And there's a beautiful document, a beautiful message, which is called a call for climate justice and the common home. This is done by the Catholics of the Global South. In this message, the bishops remind us that the ecological crisis is not an accident. It is fruit of a system that treats nature as free, peoples as expendable, and profits as untouchable. And then the peripheries of the world pay the price so that the centers of capital may continue to accumulate. So today, when you talk about many of the proposed solutions as transition, one of them, it hides false perspectives. In terms of the transitions, we call about, they are calling about energy, digital, and even military transitions that are being built upon armed mining. This mining sector was put in the center, and it creates new dependencies and zones of sacrifice, as Budi just talked about. Minerals, different minerals called critical, and the so-called rare earths are taken, and there are already a lot of studies saying they're taken from indigenous and rural territories in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, while profits flow north and communities face displacement, violence, and militarization. We can make all kinds of funds in terms of damages and losses, but we need to change. We need to go to the core of the system. What's presented as green and clean is, in fact, a new cycle of exploitation, colonialism, and green cover. So that's why many groups, and this is important when we are within these international gatherings, and especially United Nations, where the multilateralism is threatened in the world that we're living now. But it's important we talk not alone as faith-based groups, but consulting in dialogue with the different movements. So what we need is a big transformation that is socio-ecological, spiritual, civilizational. So this that can break with the idolatry of capital and with the false multilateralism captured by corporations and geopolitical interests. So defend the rights of the people and of the nature, and build democracy and sovereignty from the ground up. So our Franciscan charism call us prophetically for a resistance and, of course, for hope. It calls us to walk with communities struggling for territories free from mining, for economies that are cooperative and regenerative, and for societies rooted in justice, peace, and the care of the common home. So that's the importance that for us who participate in the Franciscan delegation that will be present again in this COP, to bring the voices, but not talk with those voices and the alternatives that are being lived and raised in the different territories. The importance of the territories and their people are fundamental for the changes that we need.
Thank you very much. As we're getting along, I want to remind everybody that they can send us their questions in the Q&A. And we actually got one for Moema. Before we continue, Moema, somebody is wondering if there was any moment in your engagement with the UN where you really felt a big space between, the reality at the grassroots and the reality that you were seeing at the UN, if there was any such case that comes to mind.
Yes, I think that the majority of those discussions are based on that huge distance, as Panunga has exposed to us since the very beginning. No, we are always expecting much more. I think that maybe in Copenhagen was one of the key moments. Budi, you were there as well, in which we were all very mobilized and expecting a big issue, and came nothing. And I will raise as well the COP in Paris, because at that moment it was very important that we had, for the first time, a clear commitment in terms of number, 1.5 degrees. It was the first time that we have that very explicitly. And I think that in the first moment, for civil society and many organizations that were there, it was a moment in which we felt a kind of combination, of coming together. Unfortunately, that did not took too long for the United States to step back from the commitment, and then everything starts to went back again. But I think that in terms of feeling very distant, Copenhagen, with a strong popular movement outside and very slow and few achievements. Coming together, I think COP in Paris, in which at least we left with the perspective of having an agreement. But this is the story, and hope is part of our motivation to keep on going.
Okay, thank you. Actually, if we're talking about the reality of COP and the actual reality of the world, this might be a good time to zoom in a little bit of what these UN conferences are really like. So over 50,000 people are expected to take part in COP30. There's estimates running as high as 70,000 participants descending on Belém. There are terms floating around like the blue zone, the green zone, pavilions. Budi, as someone who's been to the COPs before, can you help us make sense of all this? What do these conferences look like? And what will the Franciscan delegation actually be doing when they get there?
Thank you, Thomas, for the questions. And indeed, as explained before, when we read, to keep in our mind that we have the mandates from the people. So we are representing the people. So we should not lose sight when we come to this kind of big gathering with 70,000 people together. So when we know that we are representing the people, then we need to make sense on which playground we would like to bring that issue. So the term blue zone means the zone in which the negotiations are taking place, in which states will be there negotiating the decisions, the framework, the resolutions for the climate actions that are taking place. And the number of people that can have access to blue zone is very much limited. It's very much debated. So most of the people who are there are coming from the state delegations, but we also have the delegations coming from civil society. However, the tendency from years to years is that the space for the civil society to enter to the blue zone to influence the negotiation process or to express our opinion on the key issues based on our work is being limited into less and less. Though thus the space of civil society in the blue zone is shrinking. Just to give you an example, Franciscan International used to have 4 batches or 5 batches in the past. This time we only have 2 batches. Last year we had only 1 batch. So this is really to show that the space is getting smaller for civil society. However, we need to use this access to blue zone really to influence the decision-making process, or at least to share our concerns to the negotiators. That's about the blue zone. The green zone, in the past, it used to be a place for the civil society to have an exchange on their experiences, on their challenges, on their bad experiences or good experiences among the civil society. However, now it has changed as well. In the last few years, we are very much disappointed that the so-called green zone has been used as a zone in which private sectors are selling that what they call as climate solutions. So it's a huge disappointment that that space, the green zone space, is no longer a space for the exchange among the civil society, but it's only a marketplace for the so-called climate technological solutions. And people have to pay a lot to get a space over there. In the last COP in Baku, Rodrigo and I, we didn't even come to the green zone because for us, it's not very important because we are not coming from the business perspective. And then what is very important as well is to see that beyond the blue zone and green zone, there are also spaces for the civil society to organize ourselves. This is sometimes we call it as alternative, but it is not alternative, but it is a space for us to express ourselves. In Belen, there have been many discussions on the activities organized by people. One of the event that will take place is People's Summit. I think it's very right terminology. People's Summit. COP is not only about the negotiation inside, but COP is about us. So in this People's Summit, there will be discussions. There will be also political positions of the people with regard to the climate crisis. In this space, we can also be part of the discussions. We can contribute our point of view, and we can also shape our so-called policy that then we can also bring it to the negotiators, to the government to consider our positions. And of course, as faith-based organizations, there are also different activities that are taking place in parallel to the activities in the blue zone and in the green zones. Moema is part of the Tapiri initiative, which is also a very great initiative of the ecumenical activities. I'm part of also interfaith activities in which we will organize a dialogue called Talanoa Dialogue, in which people coming from different faith will have an opportunity to exchange views, but also to exchange best practices if there is. So there are different activities organized outside, and often these activities are very meaningful because they can be very much complementary to the negotiations that take place in the green zone, in the blue zone, the official zone of the negotiations. Back to you, Thomas.
Thank you. This might be a good time to go to Moema, because we've already hinted at the fact that there is a lot happening around these COPs, not just inside, and that there's different ways that we can have an impact, even though, you know, as Budi mentioned, physical access to some spaces is quite restricted. So Moema, the Franciscans are planning quite a lot of activities around the COP. Would you mind taking us through some of them?
Yeah. So I think that first I would like to share with you, yesterday we had the meeting of a very important way of organizing ourselves here in Brazil. It's in Portuguese, but I hope the translators will help us. For the first time in the Brazilian church, we organize a kind of common path, coming together from different perspectives, Franciscans, and Laudato Si movement, PAM, many others that used to act in isolated way. Now we are acting together as a church through COP30. And this has been a long process with different moments, even with pre-COPs, with meeting in the different regions. Rodrigo and myself, we have been very much inside this whole process. And I think that to show what Budi was saying, that inside and outside, they are not really isolated dynamics. From our process in Brazil, we were able to have a first document that positioned politically the church with some of the key aspects of the negotiations, as Rodrigo has mentioned, to say we do not want just to be there, but we want to be there to make a difference and to raise concern for key questions. And then we had our first document in which Franciscans has had a very important contribution. Rodrigo and myself, we were two of the writers of this document that was transformed in the document of Church of the Global South. So it's now a document that is expressing the position of churches of Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And this was an important moment. We will have during COP a symposium that many people will be there, different international organizations. We will be, as Franciscans as well, taking part in the People's Summit, as Budi has just mentioning, and we will participate actively as well in at the Tapiri, that is an ecumenical and interreligious process of discussion. Beside that, as Franciscans, we are organizing a peregrinage that connects what is all the year of the 800 years of the cantic. How do you say it in English? I'm not quite sure. Cântico de las Criaturas, I don't know.
Cântico de Creation.
So we have been organizing the whole year, combining the presence at COP with what goes beyond COP. So pre-COP, COP, and post-COP. So how to connect this perspective that is raised by St. Francis that is so up to date with the big challenges that we have today. Many of them, Rodrigo already mentioned. How not to just transform all the living word that we receive from God, and we are part of that in a big marketplace. But I think that there is a second important aspect as Franciscans that we are very much committed. We know, and sometimes yesterday we were with many different faith-based groups, we are all concerned with creation and concerned with climate change, and talking among ourselves is quite easy, even if you are not a Catholic, but if you are Buddhist, if you are an atheist even, and if you are concerned with the climate and the planet, it's easy to talk together. The key question for us is that a growing number of Catholics are now deeply connected with a fundamentalist view of religion that is deeply connected with a negationist perspective on climate and all the environmental issues. So I think that we have a very important and deep responsibility in building a theology, a perspective, a Franciscan perspective and understanding of the world that helps to bring together, to reestablish the connectivity of ourselves in the world we are part of. So in this process, I think we have political commitments, but spiritual and theological commitments as well, and a big contribution that we can give as Franciscans in this whole process.
Thank you very much. Budi, to ask you, there will also, you mentioned several interfaith events. There's also events that people can join remotely. Can you elaborate a little bit about the different things we'll be doing with other faith-based organizations?
Yes, thank you, Thomas. And indeed, I think what is very important here is to make sure that the event at COP30 is not only limited the event in Belen, but it should be the event that resonates in different places. So as Moema said, that there are events pre-COP and beyond COP and during COP. So from the perspective of the interfaith, as we are, as Franciscans International, is part of Interfaith Liaison Committee, what we are trying to do is also to embrace those who are not in Belém, but can participate. For that, almost in every COP, we organize an event called Talanoa Dialogue, a dialogue between people coming from different faith and spirituality with regard to climate solutions. And in this Talanoa Dialogue, there will be events that will take place in Belen, in the Lutheran church that's not too far from the venue of COP, but at the same time, it's going to be open online. In our experience in the previous COPs, we could have up to 150 person in the in-person meeting, but we could also have up to 200 person involved online. So we will do that. It's going to be on the 10th of November, the first day of COP, and we will share the link, the registrations, the informations to everyone so that everyone can participate. And this is only one of several events that will take place also online. So as soon as we have the informations, we can share it with you all. I think it's good, for example, for us to have a email group or WhatsApp group so that we can share all those experiences and possibility of involvement, not necessarily in Belen itself, but online or through different means.
Okay, thank you. Rodrigo, we've mentioned the People's Summit several times. In just a few minutes, could you explain what exactly the People's Summit will be?
Okay, the People's Summit, it's a gathering of, nowadays it's more than 900 organizations around the world to reflect about this the challenges that we have regarding COP. It's a parallel event, but it's connected, as Moema said, in terms of inside and outside strategy. Its global scope is bringing together different parts of the world in a platform of wide range of political topics and autonomous actions. And we are placing and reflecting the crisis and the solutions with an agenda a little bit different from the agenda inside, more broader, because if we're talking in terms of changing the system, changing our style of life, etc., on 6 axes, starting from the reflection on the first axis on living territories and live in territories, popular and food sovereignty, to discuss the historical reparations, combating environment, racism, false solutions, and corporate power. The third is just transitions. And the fourth is against oppression, for democracy. We're living in a world with huge problems of democracy and thinking of people's internationalism, just cities and vibrant urban peripheries, and popular feminism and women's resistance. So there's going to be activities from the 12th to the 16th. On the 12th, we're going to have it's the opening day where we'll be receiving a boat protest of many people that are coming, those who are arriving. Many people are coming from through the rivers plenaries and convergences activities will be on the 13 and 14. And then at the end, there will be a declaration. The day, the 15th, there is the closing plenary. In terms of this statement, will make part on the March. This is a global day of action. And then it's the international group, working group of the People's Summit is trying to discuss and talk about manifestations all around the world. There's going to be the biggest climate march on the 16th, and on the 16th, cultural activities, and it will be present the statement to the president of COP to bring it, and there's already the promise he will bring it to the blue zone. But it's a convergence. The march is a convergence of all those activities, but also other activities that are happening. So the idea of the People's Summits, it's to recuperate the people's participation on a more political perspective, especially after those 3 COPs that no participation from the civil society was possible.
Okay, thank you. I think the one thing it's safe to say is that we won't get bored. Now, the reality is that we know that many of you won't be able to travel to Brazil and to join us in Belém. And we'd still like to keep you involved in what we're doing. So to make things a little easier to keep track of everything that's happening, we're launching a new WhatsApp group today. You'll find the link in the chat. And through this channel, we'll share updates about our work at the COP. And we'll also share any events that you can be part of remotely. So if you like to keep track of what we're doing and join where you can, I highly encourage you to join this group. And again, you'll find the link in the chat. We'll also continue with the prayer chain that is hosted by our executive director, who is sharing some of his reflections around COP30. So if you're part of this initiative, or if you're not part of this initiative, but you would like to be, you can register for this prayer chain, and we're also putting a link in the chat.
I think before there are 2 questions.
Yeah, but we're answering them vertical. We're sending a message to people directly.
I said one of the questions are important because it talks about the genocide of Palestine. I think we can't separate COP, the climate issues, from the reality of a world that we're living in, where life, and it's expressed in the crisis of the climate and the crisis of the environment, and the crisis where we live, life lost its value. And of course, if we're destroying the planet, we're destroying also people. And the genocide is an important moment to remember. This is a big issue that's being discussed also at the People's Summit. People can say what is their relation? But this is the type of civilization we are living in. And the products of this civilization we can see into genocide and killing and in threatening people in poor populations in more vulnerability that they used to live.
Yeah, thank you. No, and that's a very fair point to make. And I'm at the same time I'm being conscious of the time, and I'm conscious of the fact that this discussion isn't quite done yet. Today we've covered a lot of grounds on things related to the UN, but there's more to discuss, and I think some of the issues you just mentioned is something we will cover during the following webinar on 7 October. Because under the leadership of Pope Francis, the Church has taken an outspoken position on the duty to care for creation, and that includes both nature and people. So on 7 October, we'll host our final webinar where we'll actually look at the call from the bishops' conferences in the Global South and their alignment with Franciscan charism. And we're putting a link in the chat. So in this webinar, we'll explore the more spiritual aspects of this Franciscan call to care for creation. And we hope that everybody can join us then. All the links we just shared will also be sent to you in an email after this webinar. Looking at the clock, that is really all we have time to for today. So what's left for me is to thank our panelists for joining us today. I'd also like to acknowledge two unsung heroes of this webinar, namely Brother Faustino and Brother Pepe, who generously offered to help out with the interpretation. You haven't seen them, but you've heard them, and a big thank you to the two of them. One practical message, we have some members of the Franciscan delegation here in the audience. Immediately afterwards, we have a second meeting to discuss some of the practical aspects of our journey to Belém. So if you're part of the delegation, you have received a second link. Please join us there immediately after this webinar. So for now, I have nothing else left to say but goodbye. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah.